I arrived just this morning, so I don't know if it's mentioned before, but this is, I have to say, this is like the prettiest set I've ever given a talk at. Yeah, it's really beautiful. So I'm extraordinarily honored to be here at Mayo Clinic, and thank you to Bill for extending the invitation. And I think I'm honored to be a rabble-rouser. I think I've been called worse. And it kind of obliges me to show some objectionable material, I think. So let's start. So designers have been characterized many ways. The favorite is that they're marriage brokers between function and form. So I'll draw your attention to the hole pattern of in the urinal here. Again, took me a second to get it, actually. So now it's standing right there. So everybody knows that it's idiotic to flush toilets with clean drinking water. So this is a fictional product, an imagined product that takes the gray water from the washing machines, combines it with the toilet. Designers create needs. It's very hard to sell Kleenex in the summer, pardon me. And so this packaging initiative is a result of that. Quite ingenious and apparently very, very effective. And kind of beautiful, too. Designers create an incredible amount of waste. There's more package here than there is product. Designers kind of lose their minds, too. This is a plant health checking system. You plug it into your planter, and it gives you a different color depending on like if the plant needs water or light. And the thing is, like, we have a plant checking, plant health indicator device. It's called the plant. This kind of thing makes me crazy. My daughter and I call this the potty bus. So designers create brand experiences. I can't believe this. I saw this one time. There's nobody sitting in the seats, but presumably when they're sitting in the seats, they all look like they're on the toilet. Yeah. So I don't know if that's the brand experience that Charmin is after, but that's the one that they're going to get. So designers are entrepreneurs, and we're innovators now. And if you just look at this title here, I didn't know this word. How many treps do we have in the audience here today? Yeah. And then I don't have to say anything about this. Power of design to sell New Yorkers their own trash. And the thing is, it's really beautiful. This, you may not know what this is. This is in the American Girl doll store. So the idea of the American Girl doll store is that customers will actually take their American Girl dolls with them. And so when you go to the potty, this is just an unbelievably ennobling design gesture, I think, so that your doll can go, you have a place to put your doll while you're going to the bathroom, which is really, really sweet. And so sometimes designers ennoble things, and sometimes they just work their magic. If you look at the bottom of this garbage can, this is Scott Amron, just a piece of conceptual design. He put a hand mirror inside a wastebasket so that the bottom of the waste can actually looks empty. And you all can make one, which I think is great. So my talk today is called Connective Tissue. What's a designer to do? Because design is actually kind of in crisis. I'm going to show you a bunch of design today. I'm not going to show you a bunch of good design or a bunch of bad design. I'm going to show you a bunch of design like right on the line between good and evil, because I think that actually surfaces some interesting ideas here. In terms of connective tissue, this is an initiative that was done by Pensa, who came to them, the copper development agency came to them and said, we want to use copper in the healthcare environment. It has a great antimicrobial characteristics, apparently. And so they use it in these various like literal touch points around the hospital. That's a really beautiful notion of, so every time that a doctor or nurse or healthcare practitioner touches anything like door plates, they actually clean their hands, which I think is a great idea. And then here's one of your own, when patients band together in the Wall Street Journal just from last week. I don't know if there's a designer per se, but through the social networks and the information technologies that we've been hearing a little bit about this morning, that in this case, patients with rare diseases through research initiative can find each other and the researchers can find them, where you can get to a critical mass to actually do work, get some knowledge. So designers do all kinds of things. They make the invisible visible. They translate between stakeholders. They reframe problems. They reveal opportunities. And they catalyze change. And in this way, I think that they're the connective tissue of the built environment. But I would also say not so fast. The presumptions of design are often in conflict with the desired outputs of design. And I think that this is problematic more and more, and we're seeing this. And another way of phrasing this is that what designers think that they're supposed to be doing may not actually match up with what, well, we would like them to be doing. So let me show you a few examples of what I mean. The best example ever is this example. So this is in New York in the subway. And so you have these two people who are enjoying music together, right? Splitting the earbuds on one music player. And so I don't think that the music is going to sound particularly good here. But a designer looks at this situation, at this problem space, at this use case scenario, and comes up with insights and innovates. And what do they create? They create this, right? So they destroy this in order to make this, because this seems the actual logical thing to make, to actually fix this problem. So the presumption of design here is utility and connection. Ironically, the designer is actually trying to connect people through this port. What they're doing, though, is the product of design that they're creating is a broken ritual. This is a restaurant in Victoria, British Columbia. And the idea here, the conceit, is that when you eat in the restaurant, you can actually eat out of these ubiquitous Chinese food containers, so it's like you're on like a sitcom, right? If you take out, you get them in these containers, but if you eat in, you get it in these containers. But then at the end of the meal, you are expected to clean up after yourself. So there's a station, a recycling station over here. And if you can see, they actually want you to recycle the metal. There is the sign there. And on the other side is a pair of pliers. Right? So I have to say, I'm pretty good with a pair of pliers. It is next to impossible to take one of these things apart. It is really, really hard. And so I'm thinking, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life, right? And then I'm thinking, well, hold on. If I want to have this experience in the top left, then I have to pay this labor in the bottom right. And that this is actually kind of smart, not kind of dumb. The presumption of design is sustainability, right? This is a recycling station for the restaurant. The product of design at first to me is ridiculousness. Second, it's a fair exchange. This is Lunchables, a much criticized piece of packaging with food-like material in it. These are extraordinarily successful. I was horrified to learn that kids who bring these to schools actually gain status. They're quite inexpensive, and apparently they do unbelievably well. I was walking down Park Avenue 2 months ago, and I saw this on the corner. And so there's some new initiative, Lunchables now with fruit. And so I went to the website, got back home, and I saw this. And if you read the fine print here, it says 1 serving equals a half a cup of fruit, each 4-ounce cup of dual mandarin oranges, 900%, banana, half a cup of fruit towards the 2 cups per day recommended. So that's fine. If you click further, it turns out that this is part of Project Potential, gives kids the chance to be great. Kids are incredible, given the chance and just a little help. The magic they believe in today can become the miracles of tomorrow. They've sent some people to Kennedy Space Center, Georgia Aquarium, San Diego Zoo. And when you click further, so what I actually saw on the street is part of this Keep the Smiles Coming. So they want to donate up to 1 million pounds of fruit, and your smile could make it happen. So you go to their Facebook thing, you like them, you upload a picture of you smiling, and they'll donate 10 pounds of food. And if you read the fine print here, it says the monetary equivalent of a pound of food will be donated. Okay, so they're not donating 1 million pounds of food. They're donating money. So that's okay, because they don't really have food. No offense. Maximum donation is 1 million pounds of food, and $1 equals 9 pounds of food secured by Feeding America on behalf of local food banks. So they're working with a recognized organization. So that's good. So I was giving a talk to the New York Times a couple months ago, and this was fresh. And I said, everybody pull out their phones and that has a calculator, and you should too, because it's a really nice number. And I want you to divide 1 million by 9. And so they did. And I looked out and I said, well, how much is a full page ad in the New York Times? And they said about that much. It's $111,000. So I don't know how many millions of dollars they spent on this ad campaign to give away $111,000, but this bugs me. The presumption of design is healthfulness, it's philanthropy. The product of design is just misdirection. I tried to call them and find out sort of who is responsible for this and make sure I was doing the math right. I couldn't have got very far. This is a project I did with my students where they had to redesign the next thing that they threw out. And so this student threw out a toothbrush, and she got really interested in the Miswick stick over here, and she created a brand. I should tell you that these are students in the Designers Author program at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. They're very strong graphically, so she created a brand and a product. This was 3 weeks, by the way, a 3-week project. And here it seems making it clearer. Here are the steps. You actually cut the top of it to get a fresh bristles. An ad campaign. And then I asked my students to actually make multiples of their product and photograph it in the retail environment. And I guess as a rabble-rouser, I should be, well, I mean, this kicks the shit out of the Oral-B toothbrush. Right? And I've actually done work designing toothbrushes for Oral-B. So everybody in the class is like, you are going to make $1 million. And I said, well, let's stop for a second here. I don't think you can make this. Remember, this is the 3rd week of class. Look, nobody knows each other. They don't know me. And the students are like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you're throwing out more packaging than there is product. And so Lean, the amazing student who created this, says, well, you know, they can reuse the test tube. People can reuse the test tube. And I said, Lean, are people going to reuse the test tube? And she said, probably not. I said, I don't think so. I said, but there's actually a moral reason why you can't make this. It's bad enough that we're making these products, right, to the right of it here on my screen and your screen, and packaging them in more packaging than the product is. But this product is actually, it's not a product. It is the barest, biological nutrient there is. It's literally a stick. That there's something actually obscene about packaging a stick. This is like the last product that you could put in packaging, right? And so these other students are like, this can be a really long semester. And so she puts it on the web, and of course, like, the blogs pick it up, and it goes like wildfire, right? Just like internet star in 48 hours. And the comments are fascinating, of course, because she doesn't include this part of the story. And so the comments are, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. I can't believe this is run for a school project. Whoever was the teacher in this class should be fired and not let near any young people. And other comments are, this woman isn't going to make $1 million, she's going to make $1 billion because billions of Muslims around the world brush with this stick to clean their mouths before they pray each time a day, several times a day. So the product of design here is personal care and, probably at least in the eyes of her fellow classmates, a windfall. The product of design is just one big paradox. Because I think this kind of use case happens all the time for designers. And you really have to decide if you're going to go for the force of good or the force of evil. This is the favorite thing I've ever seen. I've been teaching for, 17 years now. And this is probably the favorite project I've ever seen. And it's sort of ironic for today, you'll see. So this is Maya Lee. She threw away a dumbed lollipop package, a wrapper. She did some 2D and 3D studies, and this is what she came up with, which rhymes perfectly with the HBR cover shown earlier. So there's some meant to be here. And this is how it works. Yeah. So everybody in the class is like, you're going to make $1 million. Right? It's the same class. And I said, well, hold on. And they're like, no. And I'm like, you can't really do this, right? She's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I love this. And one day I'm going to show it in a talk. Here we are. But like, it wouldn't work. And Maya says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, it's made of paper. Right? If my lollipop dries on this thing, when I pull it off, it's going to have pieces of dried paper on it. To which she says, make it out of plastic. Right? Great. So we're going to have like tons of colored silicone discs running around our world for my daughter's grandchildren to dig up. Here, the presumption of design is utility. She thinks it's actually useful, even if we assume that it's like unacceptable to like put your lollipop down on a dish. But the product of design is gesture. I love this thing. I'm proud to show you this thing. I'm proud of her for coming up with this thing. That does not mean that we need to like put this thing out into the world. Not everything that we come up with needs to become a commercialized product. I did a product around the design of prosthetic arms a couple years ago with my students. This was a 10-week project. And we were really lucky to have John Cunningham come and kick it off, who lost his arm in Haditha in Iraq. And here he is in the class. And we also had Amy Mullins, a woman you're probably familiar with, an athlete, an advocate and model. And John brought a demonstrator that the students could use, and some of them wore it for an hour, and some of them actually wore it for 6 or 7 days. He left it there the whole semester for them to get some sort of idea of how a body-powered arm works. Body-powered arm is what we would think of as the hook. Very low tech. It's been around for 100 years, essentially no change. And so some students took an abstract look at this. Others took a very, very pragmatic look. This is sort of the state-of-the-art of prosthetics for swimming. The student who did this research was really horrified and came up with this product and this brand called Razorfish. Again, these students are very strong in graphic design, so they can whip together this stuff, I wouldn't say in their sleep, but pretty close to in their sleep. And so she constructed this upper body garment well, essentially that anyone would want, not just somebody with a prosthetic arm. Learned how to sew, worked with a seamstress and FIT, a fashion student. Really beautiful. This is Matt Luckhurst. He responded to a remark that John had made, that it was very hard for John to wear classic button-down shirts like other men because he couldn't pull them over his head. It was difficult with his prosthetic arm, but he also couldn't get them over his wrist, over his prosthetic arm, over the hook. And so Matt came up with this very ingenious idea on the right there, where he would replace the sewing, the thread of the buttons, with stretchy thread, so things would ease over. And did a bunch of experiments. And again, these are not product design students at all. Many of them had never built anything in their lives. So to be thrown into a 10-week project to redesign a prosthetic arm with Amy Mullins and John Cunningham was daunting for them. So here's sort of a retrofit kit that you can use yourself, or you can actually take your shirts, and there's a sheet of instructions that you can take to the dry cleaner or the tailor and have them sew on the new buttons with this stretchy thread. Here, the presumption of design is problem solving, but I think the product of design here is actually kind of an intervention, because you've got people who have no business designing things for this community. In many ways, these are uncredentialed designers, which I think is a place where some of the most exciting design work comes from. And we can see that in the Maker Revolution and some of the other kinds of participants that are starting to use the language of design, the tools of design, the methodologies of design, and the distribution systems of planet Earth right now. Céline Boucher, things get a little bit more abstract here. So she designed a bracelet, a cuff. Good-looking prosthetics, or natural-looking prosthetics, forgive me, are very, very expensive. And so this is a way to actually shroud a prosthetic arm for a woman that is a little less expensive and essentially dresses it up. And hopefully you walk around with that backlighting all the time wherever you go. But the thing is, like, all the women in the class wanted Céline to make her one of these. So like everybody wanted it. Beautiful universal design. Marlon Dantes with the Bangle collection took things all the way, where she replaced the prosthetic arm with this wire element and just went straight for the fashion angle and mocked up these fake fashion ads here. One of my favorite is, do you know this toy called Two Birds and Zots? You just sort of bend it. It's foam-coated wire. And so she basically co-opted the brand in Two Birds and Zots interactive arms and did this with it. And so I love this. I love it for many, many reasons. One is that this is exactly the prosthetic that a kid would want to play swords. And perhaps the more important reason is that if you talk to prosthetists, essentially all of their day is taken up by matching the fit to the socket to the stump. It's always custom. It's very uncomfortable. There's chafing and sweating, and this is really where the action is. And in this case, we had this, again, uncredentialed product designer saying, well, why don't we just wrap this thing? Because this prosthetic will fit on any old stump, right? And I understand that this kid can't eat dinner with this prosthetic, but this kid can play swords with this prosthetic, which in some senses is just as important, maybe more important. And then I love this. This is the Two Birds and Zots arm. She doesn't have a shot in retail, but this is sort of the final model. And I like the scenario where it's like, mommy, I want the this Two Birds and Zots, interactive arm. I want the prosthetic arm. And the mom's like, oh no, sorry, honey, you can't have this. You have two arms. It's like it flips the privilege, right? Is this rabble-rousing enough? So, and here's Amy. So. I have to say, John liked some of the straighter stuff, but Amy came to the end of the presentations and actually teared up, because she said I can quote her. She said that she had seen more, and there's a ton more. You can go on the web and take a look at it. More innovative thinking in prosthetic arms in 10 weeks that there had been in 100 years. And she's obviously very familiar with the field and with the state of the art. A couple more projects. So I had a student who did a project around cancer treatment. And so her discovery was that it's really scary for kids when their parent is going to lose their hair. And so she met this one woman named Wendy McCool who promised her kids that when she lost her hair that they could paint her head. And so that was really the starting off point. And so the first week, this was a 4-week project, 5-week project, she came in with this bin of basically like decoration, art materials, arts and crafts materials for her mom's head. And I have to say, it was a really long class. There was a lot of discussion because this was a piece of design. Again, she didn't have a lot of science. She had some anecdotes. It seemed kind of dangerous. And so, frankly, we were very skeptical in class, and the students were particularly tough on her. But she kept at it. She went and had a couple more meetings with Wendy and talked to some other people in treatment, some survivors, and basically came up with this brand called Tress Up with your child about facilitating the conversation. And just did an incredibly beautiful job here. And you can see the central metaphor here. The bin is actually in the shape and form of a hat box, beautifully handled. Derek Munn did a project about river pollution and architectural runoff. Actually, that should be a term in design. I like that. Different conference. Agricultural runoff related to dairy farmers at the Susquehanna River at Chesapeake Bay, where he grew up. And there's just an unbelievable amount of pollution. He could not find a way to make a dent in this, and suddenly he realized that he needed to design a solution, not a problem. And so he created this series of buoys, a fictional product, that would essentially report the contaminants down the river to some sort of Google map where you could see how you were doing, and so that the farmer downriver, who was actually doing better than the farmer upriver, could, in some ways, like just shame themselves into behaving better and sharing best practices, which I think is beautiful. And then the last project to show you is called Mother to Mother by Gina Min. And this is also about connective tissue for the designers, where she realized that grandmothers had an incredible amount of wisdom that new mothers didn't have, but the grandmothers weren't tapped for it. The mothers were tapped for it. And so she basically appropriated the visual iconography of phone sex ads. Yeah, sorry. You want? Good. Yeah. I don't drive, but I'm sure this works. Yeah. So here's a little recording.
Hello. Mother to Mother is here to help you. Please select from the following menu, or if you know the extension of the grandmother you're trying to reach, please press that extension. For the pregnancy department, press 1. For the baby department, press 2. For the toddler department, press 3. For all other inquiries, such as household problems, cooking, legal problems, and cultural questions, press 4.
So it's a pretty sweet solution. Here, the presumption of design is fresh eyes. The designers bring fresh eyes to a problem. The product design here for lots of these projects that I'm showing you is really subversion. It's not about solving the problem. It's about, in many ways, sort of sticking your finger into sort of a territory that you may not be entirely credentialed to play in. So what is a designer to do? How can we be the best connective tissue? How should we navigate this terrain? I think that there are 3 acknowledgments that I would leave you with today. The first one is that we are no longer living in a world of objects and things. We're living in a world of flows and negotiations. We were always living in this world, only we're starting to really, really see it now because the consequences of what we do are undeniable. This moves us from a static problems and solutions to a place of dynamic problem spaces. In the old days, there'd be a problem and a solution, and you would solve the problem and it'd be okay, next problem. This is beyond naive. I wouldn't even use the word solution, and I don't with my students. Offerings is the best I can do, but if you have a better word, that would be great. But we understand that this is now a negotiation. And probably no room full of people understand this better than you do. You have products and services, but this is a constant negotiation. And it's not a failure of design because you don't have a solution. I think it's actually a mature way of looking at the problem space, that this is a negotiation, and that it's living, it's organic, it's changing. The second acknowledgement is we all have presumptions about what we're supposed to be doing and for whom. And we just have to be humble about it. We have these preconceived ideas. I'm a designer, so I need to make mass manufactured products that are for sale. We just have to like stop that. There are other kinds of value, this was alluded to earlier, other kinds of currencies, design currencies, cultural currencies, and I think in the next 10, 20 years, we'll start to see those emerge. And I think we have to, because things aren't going so great right now. So we know all this transformation, it's not just a big word. We have to. It's obvious. And then the third acknowledgement is that designers, this is a drum I've been beating for a while now, is that designers think they're in the artifact business, but they're not. They're in the consequence business. If you are making one of something and then multiplying it more than one, and that can be a brochure or an ad campaign or a series of phone calls, or sure, a mass-produced product or service or system, you are not in the artifact business. You're in the consequence business. And when you understand that you're in the consequence business, a couple things change. You move from the question of what do you want to make to what do you want to do. And now I will add one more and close with this. I think we're now in a place in the world where we've gone from what do you want to do to who do you want to be. And I think where we are now with Mayo Clinic, I think there's an extraordinarily keen eye on who this is, on who the brand is. Brand not in a dirty word sense, brand in a great sense. I am creating a new MFA program that I would love to talk to anyone who's interested or send some students. That's going to launch next September, a year from this week. And I couldn't thank you enough. And I have to realize, this is like the best thank you slide I've ever had, but apparently I have to articulate it. So somebody pasted a picture of Tom Hanks and a period on the thanks. So thank you very much. That's it.
As a true rabble-rouser, you're the first one to go over time. I love that. So architectural runoff, that's really secretly what you designers call strip malls, right? I mean, you knew that term before you came in, right? You didn't just coin it.
I'm walking home with it now, that's for sure.
Architectural runoff, I love that. Talk a little bit about the prosthetic project, because the DARPA initiative to try to confront this issue of arm prosthetics really relates to the fact that so many people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan have traumatic injuries to the upper body that they normally would not have survived, or at least a generation ago would not have survived, but now they do survive. And the engineering and design question for leg prosthetics is almost trivial compared to the design and engineering parameters to make a successful arm prosthetic.
Yep.
Give us a sense of the complexity of the problem as DARPA sees it.
Well, I think, and this was what some people were worried about, is that the DARPA project would result in essentially $1 million arm with a big CPU and battery trailing behind it on a wire that nobody could afford and that nobody could buy. And that there would be a lot of trickle down, because when you watch the videos, they're incredible, they're mesmerizing. But in the prosthetic community, there's a lot of concern, not just in the prosthetic community, about, it's like, well, what do we get? We just want a better hook. I mean, John Cunningham looked me in the eyes and said, I just want a better hook. And he's running an incredible organization now, openprosthetic.org, which is essentially amputees and engineers and hackers and modders that are basically just open source wiki suggestions for how to change the rubber band on the thing. I mean, the divide.
The Pimp My Gimp program that actually was in Doonesbury.
But yeah, no question that this is just a completely different thing than that is.
We've talked a lot about enlisting the consumer or the patient or whatever you want to call them as a part of the design team. In many ways, the prosthetic example is possibly one of the best, because not only are you talking about developing the engineering parameters for an imitative human-style arm, which is one way of looking at the problem, but you also have to convince amputees to shed their preconceived notions of what a prosthesis can be, to allow you to do these interchangeable, multiple use, single use, like Amy Mullins does, different prosthetics for different occasions, almost a fashion accessory. How do you get people to do that?
Yeah, I think she calls them her highs, like her boyfriend's matters. Like, oh, I'm going to wear my high legs tonight. You know, it's like, really? Because I'm going to be walking around like this, you know.
No, and she has them. She sometimes
like
feels like being 7 feet tall. Sometimes she feels like being, 5'11".
Well, I mean, I loved, again, the fact that these people weren't industrial designers. You know, one woman thought, well, you know, you have this arm that isn't an arm. Why don't I put a zipper and make it a pencil case? And then that turned into this garment, this sort of, you know, almost like a half vest. That was a great product that she actually had some interest in people purchasing. I'm not saying that the indicator of success is that it gets sort of translated into the culture at large, but John Cunningham was adamant about the fact that the biggest impediment to progress here was the critical mass of consumers. There just weren't enough arm amputees for anyone to sink the R&D dollars into it. And these are his words, not mine. And it just was sort of incredibly sobering that he literally was like, well, then we're just going to start a wiki and do it ourselves. It was a very emotional project. And again, you know, if you imagine your students and you know, you have these people coming to visit you and they've never built anything in their lives and you ask them to do a new prosthetic arm, they kind of flipped out. But you see how they danced around the problem. Some of them actually went for a much more engineering solution. I didn't show those today. But there were a lot that were sort of on the fringes of what a problem space is. And I think that's why Amy was just so delighted, because she is about sort of the art of it. And so between like industrial design and art were these like dilettantes in a way, playing at the edges of stuff that she just thought, like, this is how you need to push the middle of it.
Well, and also her dad built her original prosthetics when she was a little girl after she was amputated. So she's completely at home around a lab where people have saws and hammers and are making legs. Finally, is this long tail idea where there are very customized, dependent problems that the solution of which is not generalizable to a million products. Is that really an exciting and important and possibly challenging template for a lot of the problems in healthcare that a lot of these people deal with?
Yes, I think this notion of mass-produced one-of-a-kinds is something that many, many people are excited about with 3D printing and rapid prototyping and manufacture on demand. I think it's still very much in its infancy, but just like people will criticize personas in design research, and it's like, well, don't talk about, you know, here's Maggie, she's a mother of 3, and you know, on and on. Like, talk about a real person. The long tail of real people is now capturable. I heard that there was a great session this morning on data, and I wish I could have been here for that. But we can know all these data points along the long tail and to start to cluster them and to see, again, like a critical mass where just like that's where some action is. You know, stick design there. It's unbelievably exciting. It's like the greatest time for design, as much as I sort of criticize it. You know, I'm its biggest cheerleader too.
Personal question before we go. How long did you look into that toilet before you saw that picture?
Well,
how many toilets did you look into before you took that picture? You know, just trying to get a feel for how your mind works. Instantaneous?
No, actually, it took me a minute. I thought that I couldn't decide if it was intentional or not, or if it was Freudian. It's like, am I seeing a penis? Well, now I went and said penis, too. Well, the penis is kind of a health care word.
So I guess you really had to go, and we all benefited from that. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the time.